While all the world's attention is focused on the US war against Iran, Donald Trump has unexpectedly decided to play along with the Russian dictator and even save Vladimir Putin from economic collapse. The United States of America, which had previously banned the purchase of Russian oil, has now, on the contrary, allowed India to buy Russian oil that was stuck at sea. The US Treasury Department stated that Indian oil refineries are buying millions of barrels of crude oil from the Russian Federation to overcome supply shortages caused by the crisis in the Middle East. We're potentially talking about tens of millions of barrels of oil at a time when its price has sharply increased. But the whole paradox is that at the same time the Donald Trump administration stated that they intend to ask China, on the contrary, to reduce its oil purchases from Russia and buy more from the US. According to Trump's team, such an agreement should weaken the Russian Federation's position in the war against Ukraine. And as the cherry on top of all this confusion, Trump once again stated that it is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky who is preventing a peace agreement, and that Ukraine is rapidly losing its bargaining position. At the same time, in the Kremlin, Volodymyr Putin, according to Trump, has supposedly been ready for dialogue for a long time. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this episode, and leave any comment under this video. This really helps a lot in promoting the content on YouTube, and I will be very grateful to you for that. In addition, subscribe to my Telegram channel Peachy News. The link is in the description of this video. There, we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, the United States Department of the Treasury has put forward an initiative. In India, there is a temporary 30-day exemption that allows the purchase of Russian oil, which is currently in port or at sea. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reported this. He explained that the energy policy of the current American president, Donald Trump, has led to the highest level of oil and gas production ever recorded. And then Scott Bessent added a quote about New Delhi's temporary permission to purchase Russian oil, which has been frozen. I'll share the quote, then we'll analyze it. To ensure the continued flow of oil to the global market, the U.S. Department of the Treasury is issuing a temporary 30-day waiver that will allow Indian refineries to purchase Russian oil. This deliberately short-term measure will not bring significant financial benefit to the Russian government, as it only allows transactions with oil that is stuck at sea. Now let me explain. I should note right away that this is two lies in one. First of all, Scott Bessent forgot to add that it was Donald Trump who previously forbade India from buying Russian oil under the threat of tariffs. And it was Trump who started the war against Iran, which led to fluctuations in the oil market. And the second lie is that the so-called temporary permission will not bring big money to Vladimir Putin. That's not true. Here Bessent tells us once again, this deliberately short-term measure won't provide significant financial benefit to the Russian government. That's a lie. That's a lie because Bessent claims that it's supposedly only about oil that's stuck at sea, not about new deliveries. Like there's nothing to profit from here. Let me explain something. First of all, the thing is that most oil shipments to India are actually done by sea. Secondly, before the start of hostilities in Iran, about 60% was stuck at sea. 60 million barrels of Russian oil that nobody wanted to buy because of the sanctions. Tankers with this oil were simply, drifting at sea. This oil was just stored for weeks at sea on tankers, and Putin was already offering absolutely massive discounts just so someone would buy it. Why? Because Russia was already forced, it was already on the verge of cutting oil production, because there was simply nowhere left to store it. And so, what does the US Treasury do? In fact, they give India the full green light to buy up all this Russian oil that got stuck at sea, the oil Putin didn't know what to do with. Putin said, for God's sake, I'm already giving you discounts, we'll even pay you extra, just take it. What? And you also need to understand that now India is forced to buy this oil not at the discount Putin offered earlier, but at a high price. Considering that Brent crude oil jumped to $89 per barrel the day before. That's, a brilliant move, of course. This temporary measure will ease the pressure caused by Iran's attempt to take the global energy sector hostage. And as is known, earlier the US insisted that New Delhi stop buying Russian oil. In return, Washington offered its American oil to the Indian market. Subsequently, the US and India signed a trade agreement. The agreement in February 2026 provided for India to give up a significant share of Russian energy resources. Over time, New Delhi found alternative markets to Russia for oil purchases. In addition to the United States, these included Middle Eastern countries, but current supplies from them have become impossible due to the war in Iran. But the paradox is that at the same time, according to the Wall Street Journal, the same Scott Bessent stated that the US intends to ask China, on the contrary, to reduce its oil purchases from Russia and buy more from the US. If China agrees, this could also weaken Russia's position in the war against Ukraine. The Wall Street Journal writes that ahead of US President Donald Trump's visit to China, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is already considering issues that should be included on the agenda. One of the topics could be the reduction of China's purchases of Russian oil. According to sources, Bessent has already spoken about efforts to persuade China to buy US oil and gas products instead. The Wall Street Journal also specifies that Secretary Bessent is considering raising the issue of energy at a meeting with his Chinese counterpart, Vice Premier He Lifeng, which is scheduled to take place in Paris as early as mid-March. At this meeting, they plan to agree on the framework for a summit between Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping, which is currently scheduled for early April. A reduction in purchases of Russian oil would indeed be a serious challenge for China, which still receives oil from the Russian Federation at a significant discount. They say that American oil would be much more expensive, and refusing Russian oil supplies would undermine Beijing's relationships with the Kremlin and would weaken Moscow's position in the war. In addition, Bessent is considering the possibility of asking China to reduce its purchases of Iranian oil as well. The Wall Street Journal has now explained that, although most Iranian oil shipments have been suspended after strikes by the US and Israel, Washington wants Beijing to reduce its long-term dependence on Iranian oil if shipments resume later.
Короче, с одной стороны,
the United States of America allows India to buy Russian oil, but on the other hand tries to discourage China from doing the same. Although in both cases, all this money goes to Putin to continue the war against Ukraine. And against this backdrop, Trump just decided to finish everyone off and stunned with a statement. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky is preventing a peace agreement, and Ukraine is rapidly losing its bargaining position, while the Kremlin is supposedly ready for dialogue. This was stated by US President Donald Trump. In particular, the US President expressed dissatisfaction with Volodymyr Zelensky's position regarding ending the war. And according to Trump, the Ukrainian side is losing its leverage while the Kremlin is supposedly showing full readiness for dialogue. And I'll finish with a quote from Trump. Zelensky should get to work and make a deal. It's incredible that he is the obstacle. You have no cards, now he has even fewer. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. Friends, if you found this episode useful and interesting, you can support our YouTube channel financially with a donation or a paid subscription using the links and details in the description of this video or by scanning the QR code on your screen. Take care of yourselves. Bye everyone.